Today we're focusing on education. We're going to be lifting up our teachers in blessing here in a moment. We're going to be in Exodus chapter 16 under the title today, The Mountaintop and the Battlefield. And the children of Israel, God had taken them out of Egypt. He'd sent them out into the wilderness. They were headed towards the promised land. Moses, their leader, kids, are you keeping track how many times I say Moses? Moses, 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 Moses. Moses. Children of Israel out into the wilderness. And I think God really used the wilderness as a classroom. Now, teachers, I know you can look at this semester or this year and think that from here it does look like 40 years wandering in the wilderness between now and May. Thank you. Thank you for wandering well and leading our kids. Dallas Willard said this about Israel coming out of Egypt. He says, God had taken Israel out of Egypt in the Exodus. But in the wilderness, God was now working on taking Egypt out of Israel. See, it was a group of slaves. They had been told what to do their entire lives, and now God was teaching them about discipleship. What it meant to live a life following a loving Father and not a spiteful king or Lord. There's lessons to be learned. In the immediate context we're looking at today, Exodus chapter 17, the Israelites had come to camp at Rephidim. And you get that amount of people together for any extended amount of time, and there's a little bit of grumbling. Moses, did you bring us out here to die? There were plenty of burial plots in Egypt. Why do we need to go to the wilderness? Moses, we're hungry. Moses, we're thirsty. You know, they start to sound like kids in a classroom, right? When is recess? When's lunch? I'm hungry, right? And Moses doesn't quite know what to do with the children of Israel. And he goes to God. He says, God, what? You gave me these people. What do you want me to do with them now? And God tells Moses, hey, there's a rock. Go and strike the rock, and water will come out, and I will provide for Israel. Moses strikes the rock, water comes forth, and the children of Israel are satisfied. And in verse 8 of Exodus chapter 17, we pick up the story. While Israel was still at Rephidim, the warriors of Amalek attacked them. Whoa, hold on. Rephidim, wasn't that the place that God provided water? Yes. Wasn't that a place of blessing? Yes. Wasn't that a place that God had provided for his children? Yes. And you mean they were attacked? In the same place that God had given blessing, there came an attack. And isn't it an affront to our theology and our way of thinking to think about the same place that where we received a blessing can also be a place where we receive extreme challenges? God, didn't you give us water? Shouldn't this be a safe place for us to be? Deuteronomy 25, verses 17 and 18 tell us a little bit about what this attack looked like by the Amalekites. Never forget what the Amalekites did to you as you came from Egypt. They attacked you when you were what? Exhausted and weary. They struck down those who were straggling behind you. They had no fear of God. Did Amalek attack them in their strongest position? No. Amalek wasn't about to play fair. He found the stragglers. He found those who were weak and were exhausted, and the Amalekites went after them. You see, we are often attacked when and where we are weakest. It's not in our moments of strength that those attacks come. It's in the moment of weakness. And it's in those moments that are the most difficult. For the children of Israel, felt like they'd been outflanked. God, where are you? I think about this story and remember playing basketball in high school, and one of the principles of any good offense or any good defense is taking advantage of the other team's weakness. You don't keep driving the ball into the person who's guarding the paint really, really well. You don't keep shooting on the person who's guarding you really well. No, dish it out. Dish it out. Find the weakness in the other team and attack it. And the Amalekites do the very same. So children of Israel need to get a plan of action together. In verse 9, it tells us that Moses commanded Joshua choose some men to go out and fight the army of Amalek for us. Tomorrow, I will stand at the top of the hill holding the staff of God in my hand. So I imagine this meeting between Moses and Josh. And Mo invites Josh over to the tent, and he's like, Josh, I got a plan, okay? Here's what we're going to do. You're going to get the best Israel has to offer in terms of its warriors. You're going to go out and fight the Amalekites, and don't worry about me. I'm just going to go hike up the mountain, okay? Have a good time. Imagine Joshua at first is kind of like, okay, what kind of plan is this? But notice, when Moses tells Joshua that he's headed up the hill, what is he carrying with him? The staff of God in his hand. And that staff had been used before. It had been used to demonstrate the power over nature, turning water to blood, becoming a snake, and then becoming a stick again. It had parted waters at the Red Sea. You see, Moses knew something. He knew that the mountaintop is just as important as the battlefield. Yes, Joshua needed to go out and fight. They needed to defend themselves against the Amalekites. But Moses saw his responsibility to ascend the mountain holding the symbol of God's power and protection. John Mackay, in his commentary on Exodus, says Moses' rod symbolizes the presence of God in power. And it would be by that power that the outcome of the battle was decided. And we read, continuing on, verse 10 of Exodus 17. So Joshua did what Moses had commanded and fought the army of Amalek. Meanwhile, Moses, Aaron, and Hur climbed to the top of a nearby hill. As long as Moses held up the staff in his hand, the Israelites had the advantage. But whenever he dropped his hand, the Amalekites gained the advantage. Imagine Joshua on the battlefield, Moses on the mountaintop. And you'd expect the scriptures to describe Joshua's battle array, to describe the men that he took into battle with him and the techniques by which he used to defeat the Amalekites. But the story shifts us from the battlefield to the mountaintop to say that Israel's victory was dependent on Moses' position of prayer. That as Moses held up his hands, Moses was interceding on behalf of the people in the valley. What went on in the battlefield below was determined by what occurred on the mountaintop. And I was thinking back, illustrating this point. I remember one time I grew up cheering for the Seattle Seahawks, okay? So thank you, there's a few of us. I will make no comment about any other football teams today, okay? Because I value my life. But one time I was cheering for them, watching the game on TV, and I had a Seattle Seahawks football, and it was a glow-in-the-dark football. And it was one of those games where it seemed to be every time I held the football, they were losing, and then when I would set it down, they would start to win. So you start to play the game, right? Man, I kind of, enjoy holding, they're losing, let me set that aside. And we can become a little bit superstitious. And on the outset, it looks like this is kind of what's happening, that Moses, just keep your hands in the air, and as long as your hand's in the air, it correlates to the victory on the battlefield. But Moses is doing something very intentional in this mountaintop experience. He is interceding on behalf of Israel in front of God. And the battle is directly connected to his intercession. He stands before God on behalf of the people. The story doesn't say much about Joshua's attack or his tactics in battle. No, it describes Moses' posture and prayer. Tyler Staton puts it this way: and praying like monks, living like fools. When we engage in intercessory prayer, we are loving others on the basis of heaven's resources. Prayer is heaven's highest security clearance. Free access to stroll right into the heavenly vault, gather up whatever we can carry, and hand it out to the world. We are rulers calling the shots of how heavenly resources are distributed. Another author, Ellen White, says, prayer is the key in the hand of faith that unlocks heaven's storehouses. As Moses has got his hands lifted up, raising up that staff that had been a symbol and a reality of God's provision and protection over his people. What he's doing is engaging in the most deadly warfare that any human can engage in. And that's calling on God on behalf of someone that you love. Prayer is extremely important to our lives. And I believe this year's success in any of our schools, for any of our teachers or our students, will not be dependent on the degrees that you hold, on the talents and gifts that you have, though they may be many. This year's success is dependent upon our intercession on behalf of our schools, our teachers, and our students. Exodus 17, verse 12 says this: Moses' arms soon became so tired that he could no longer hold them up. The text seems to allude that he started off holding up the staff in one hand and then kind of passing it to the other, and you kind of know that dance a little bit if you're trying to hold something up. It's like, okay, arms starting to get, blood starting to flow down, starting to fall asleep, let me pass it over to the other, and back and forth, to the point that he could no longer hold up his arms. He realizes that the battle is in question. And so Aaron and Hur found a stone for him to sit on. And then they stood on each side of Moses holding up his hands, so his hands held steady until sunset. Imagine the scene. Moses had not ascended the mountaintop alone. He had Aaron and Hur beside them. And those two men, recognizing Moses' need, said, Mo, come on. We have a chair for you. It is a designer chair, premium rock on this mountainside. Come on and have a nice, comfortable seat, Moses. So Moses sits down, and Aaron and Hur stand beside him. And I imagine Moses resting his arms on the shoulders of Aaron and of Hur, and interceding, saying, God, would you fight this battle for us? Would you win this battle on our behalf? And the text doesn't tell us when the battle started, but if I'm wanting to get an edge on the enemy, I'm starting early. It says that he did this until sunset. His hands held steady. John Mackay, again, his commentary on Exodus, says Moses' ministry of intercession was too wearisome a task for one man to maintain. You and I know this. I've been a part of those text threads where someone has said, hey, this is happening in someone's life. We need more people praying. You've been the one to reach out to someone else and say, I need your help in this. I need you to pray. It's our instinct to reach broader and wider, the more serious the need that we have to intercede on behalf of people, because we believe intercession does something. See, the work of intercession is not a solo endeavor. You cannot carry the weight of the world on your shoulders before God. You can attempt to, but you will quickly realize that you need people in your life praying for you. We could pass a mic around today and ask you, hey, who is praying in your life? And you would tell us stories about, my mom prayed for years, my grandma prayed for years, my dad prayed for years, my grandfather. I've been praying for my kids for years. There's other people that have been joining me as well. It's a matter of prayer, a matter of interceding on others' behalf. Moses could not do it alone. The task was too great. He needed godly companions who would recognize his need and support him in his weakness. And the same is true for us today. If we are to succeed in this academic school year, we need to be praying for our schools, for our teachers, and for our students. Exodus 17, verse 13 says this: as a result, Joshua overwhelmed the army of Amalek in battle. Why? Because Joshua was a good general? Because Joshua had the best fighting band around? Because Joshua was a military strategist? No. As a result of what? Moses interceding on his behalf did Joshua gain the victory. John Mackay again says, in the valley, the Israelites were active in resisting the adversary, but their success in the battle depended on the divine empowerment mediated through the intercessory prayer of Moses. And we can look at the story. We can make it an analogy for this year, and we can very quickly look at it and say, well, teachers and students, there might be in the valley that Joshua and Amalek are fighting, and we're not going to say that whether the teachers are Joshua or Amalek or the students are Joshua or Amalek, right? But there's battles fought in the classroom over this year. No, I think our students are the ones that are in the valley. Our students are Joshua. fighting an attack that has come in their weakest time. This generation today is facing things that previous generations never had. And in the world that we live in today, it can be so easy to get in a moment of weakness, a place where, well, I don't know what to believe. That ideology sounds like something I should hang on to. That seems like a way that I should go. And go figure, we get enough people together in one community that something is going to happen. I pray it doesn't, but something will happen this year. The loss of a family member, an accident, a diagnosis, something is bound to happen, get this many people together. And our students carry the burden of growing up in this society, in this generation. And they fight battles every single day. And teachers, you're Moses. You're Moses on the mountaintop, interceding on behalf of your students. Yes, you're pouring out your knowledge base. You're giving them the best you have and the expertise that you've trained in. But at the end of the day, I believe above all else, your desire as much as mine is that these students would grow into a relationship with Jesus. Put any discipline out in front of them, math, science, reading, history, handwriting. Do we still do handwriting in elementary school? I hope we do. I pray that you are teaching your students as Jesus would, that you are lifting up before them an example. And Forever Family, can I talk to the church folk for a moment? You think, wow, okay, students are in the valley, Moses is on the mountain, we're off the hook. No. Forever Family, we are Aaron and Hur. We are the ones who can stand beside our teachers and pull up the most luxurious designer, hard as a rock chair and say, can you rest a little bit? Rest your arms on my shoulders as you intercede on behalf of your students. Count me in praying for your classroom, for your school, and for your students this year. Let me know how I can help. Church, our teachers need us. They need us to be intercessors on behalf of them and on behalf of their students. And notice, as the victory is won, God speaks in Exodus 17, verses 14 through 16. It says, after the victory, the Lord instructed Moses, write this down on a scroll as a permanent reminder and read it aloud to Joshua. God says, Mo, there's something I need Josh to know. I need you to write this down so that you'll remember and that he will remember. Because I'm going to erase the memory of Amalek from under heaven. I'm going to wipe them out. So Moses built an altar there and named it Yahweh Nisi, which means the Lord is my banner. And he said, they have raised their fist against the Lord's throne, so now the Lord will be at war with Amalek generation after generation. We're introduced to a name of God. The Lord is my banner. And banners were used in war to communicate who was who on the battlefield. And maybe even to signal a particular movement by a particular rank of soldiers. In essence, banners or flags describe identity, who is who, and whose you were. And we see the same thing today. Look no farther than the Olympics that just happened a couple weeks ago, or any kind of sporting event. There are different banners that carry different insignia defining a group of people. People rally behind those banners. And Exodus is clear. God says, raise no other banner than me. I will be your banner in battle. Let other people know that I am the Lord your God, that you are following me, and I am the one who will give you instructions in battle. John Walton, IVP Bible Commentary, says, the name given it, Yahweh is my banner, reflects the theology of Yahweh as the leader of the armies of Israel. And my prayer is that we raise no other banner than the name of God, that God will be our leader and the one that we point towards. John McKay again, in time of confusion and danger, it is to the Lord that Moses turned in prayer. And it was by his help and power that the victory was won. Is by taking direction from him and relying upon his resources that the Lord's people were victorious. Because you see, at the end where God says, I'm going to wipe Amalek off the face of the earth, the battle was between the Lord, not Israel, and Amalek. The whole time, the enemy was attacking God's people, but they really had beef with God. So when we are attacked, when we face challenging circumstances, remind yourself that the battle that is being fought is not yours to fight. Scripture is clear, front to back, stand firm. With a whole bunch of defensive pieces of armor, one offensive piece of armor, that's the Word of God. Stand firm and let the Lord fight the battle for you. The battle we wage this year and in our lifetime is not one fought against flesh and blood. It's against angels and principalities and the forces of darkness. All we need to do is stand still and allow God to fight the battle for us. Elizabeth Talbot, in her book, The Battle Belongs to the Lord, says, frequently we face situations in which our strength and wisdom are not enough. Yet we have this reassurance to rely on. Though we are powerless, our God is powerful. Ronald Rolheiser, in his book, Sacred Fire, says, rarely do we grasp how much prayer is really a question of life and death for us. We need to pray, not because God needs us to pray, but because if we do not pray, we will never find any steadiness in our lives. Simply put, without prayer, we will always be either too full of ourselves or too empty of energy, inflated or depressed. Joshua can go fight the battle on his own, but he will leave exhausted and depleted. When we turn to God in prayer, we find the place where we set ego aside and we set energy aside. You say, God, use me. Use all of me. So for this school year, I want to encourage you that the mountaintop is just as important as the battlefield. Our classrooms, our schools will experience challenge this year. That Jesus said it. In this world, you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world.